My name is Rachel Whitworth, and this is the fourth in our series of 5 workshop webinars for the 2020 IUN Forum. Now it is my great pleasure to introduce Jená Bellezza, the Chief Operating Officer of the Indiana Parenting Institute. Jená Bellezza began, as all citizens do, as a K-12 student, for you can never learn where you go until you get educated on what you can do and be. As she learned, both she and her educators began to notice skills, interests, and strengths in her. She loved to learn. She emphasized with everyone. She preferred being a team member, but ensured that everyone to exercise their leadership within the team. She tended towards those activities that located solutions to solve others' problems, furthering their capacity to help themselves. Post secondary, she decided to pursue a career in public policy, as it seems to embody all that she had grown to love. Though she was at one of the nation's best colleges, she had yet required the skills and knowledge needed to fully escape from her poverty. And at that time, she did not have the information needed to equip her to complete her college career. From Ivy League college student to struggling actress to Italian housewife to a scientific studies translator for LILT, being fluent in Italian, to a divorced legal secretary to the CEO of her family's non-for-profit. Jená brings to her daily work over 30 years experience and the wisdom acquired as she had lived all of these pit stops that permitted her to reach the purpose as she uncovered so long ago. Having thought through these pit stops, acquired the knowledge and the life experience needed her to help the world by helping to resolve the challenges its families and the world's face. Jená, welcome to the IUN Forum and thank you for presenting today.
Thank you. My goodness. It's really interesting hearing your story. Because, it's one thing to live it, but to actually have someone kind of give it back to you is a little eye-opening because you're like going, yeah, I did do all that, didn't I? But anyway, so again, thank you all for having me here and allowing me to do this presentation, which I have chosen to do it as my story. I don't often go into the details of how I got to where I am, but I'm really honored to have this opportunity to do it with you all. So be patient with me as we go through this. Just wanted to let you know that because I decided to do it more as a testimonial, the format of my presentation is going to be very casual, which if anybody out there knows me, I'm pretty casual as it goes. So it behooves me to not stand here as a educator or a person of authority speaking before you, but just to talk to you as a friend. And when we talk about poverty, you're really going to see me kind of giving you different perspectives on the issue as opposed to throwing out any data. So what I want to say to my data people, though, is that I do have data on the things that I will be pondering on. So if you want that information at the end of the presentation, I will bring up my email so that you can email me and I can send you stuff. But right now we're going to take the time to just have a really interesting conversation to see if we can look at this through different lenses and see what we come up with from there. Just some disclaimers, which is basically, because I'm doing it that way, be patient with me. I am going to be me, be real, and in the hopes of that, I encourage all of us to do that. So I am going to now share my screen. So I want to say one thing about my leading slide before I start the presentation, which is, as I was writing it, I was like, boy, this reminds me of AA. In AA, when you go, my name is, and I'm an alcoholic. So I decided that I was going to present this by starting it off that way. So here we go. You guys ready? Okay, so here we go. My name is Jená Bellezza, and I am a product of poverty. I like to know what it means. So, poor. The condition of lacking the means to obtain the comforts of life. So, it's a condition. It's not a station. Conditions change, whereas stations not so readily. One usually parks at a station for a while. So, and comforts. The interesting thing about comforts is that usually we're programmed on what is comfortable and what is not. But it's like within that programming, we're allowed choice. So we're allowed to be selective of the pot of comforts that we may choose from. So it's subjective. So to obtain the comforts of life is a programmed yet subjective component of poverty. Having no resources or stuff or supports, connections. So poverty is about stuff and people. One's network, and a network connects. And without connections, it's difficult to locate supports. So poverty is a condition of being disconnected, which made me ponder, does that mean the deficiencies of poverty are actually the effect of that disconnection and not the cause of it? Something to think about. So deficient or lacking in skills, ability, power, qualifications, knowledge, preparation, or other desirable qualities. Desirable. Again, that's another programmed yet subjective component. In need. Think hungry to the point of weakness. So let's look at that word weakness. Lacking strength, defenseless, non-productive, unable to take care of myself or others. Therefore, I'm dependent upon others. Oh, and there goes the last definition. Dependent upon support. That is, benefits primarily, if not solely, from others' generosity. Dependent. My life is not my own. Another does all of the driving. My life and my successes are determined by others. So that basically means my will kind of gets put to the side, you know, that I have to do what everybody else says, that what I want is really not significant. The point of insignificance. Sounds like bondage to me, you know, like this chronic subjection to another. So from these definitions, to me, poverty sounds like a physical situation, but a physical situation that can be changed. But according to the last definition there, it can also reach a point where the change option becomes more arduous. So are there levels to poverty? You know, a level or a point that flips it over to a point of no return? Now, as I was going through these definitions of poor, I started thinking, but this is encouraging though, that it's physical situations. Because what that says is poverty is not an inability to be different or better or to change, but it just requires having the awareness of the things that are different, or an awareness of that I can make things different, and then the know-how of how to do that. Oh, more definitions. Okay, so of an inferior, inadequate, or unsatisfactory kind. Wow. Not suitable, sufficient for any purpose. Faulty, unfortunate, unexceptional. Now, these aren't situations one can readily change, right? But rather, they're feelings that have gotten linked to the situations. I mean, inferior, unfortunate, unsuitable, faulty are all indicative of an emotional condition. And when negative emotions such as these get tied to our life circumstances, those physical situations, we then are at a great risk of self-fulfilling these prophecies. by the progressively destructive choices that those negative emotions move us to make. Oh my. And where I think our culture or society seems to err is in believing or concluding that signs of one, so signs of a physical situation, poverty, indicate signs of the other, that emotional condition, or the emotional condition of poverty, feeling faulty or unfortunate or insignificant, indicates that I have the physical stance of poverty. So I want us to look at these photos. They depict scenes from Child Protective Service, whom in Indiana here we call them DCS, and they run across stuff like this daily. So my question to you is, do these photos exhibit the first set of definitions given for poor, those physical situations, or the second set, or both? The photos, in my opinion, definitely reveal parents who are lacking in something: skills, know-how, help, time perhaps, but does that necessarily imply unsuitable, faulty, inferior? I mean, in general, as a person or as a way of operating. Now remember, agencies like DCS must use photos like these to determine whether or not they will be removing a child from its home and family to live with strangers for, at the time of removal, no one knows for how long. I mean, it's a pretty big decision to make based largely or based highly on these elements that we're seeing here. Let me hear what some people think.
So we have the last set of definitions, both. I believe it's both. Someone stated that 2 and 3 are poverty, 1 and 2 possible neglect. And then the last comment, both, because one can influence the other.
Ooh, I like that one. Thank you for those comments. So, but I want to throw this at you. Now, maybe at least one, if not all of these parents could be, in fact, providing each of their children all the love, attention, and to the best of each of their capability, the stuff they need and that society and culture deems they need. And what I mean by that is those appearances society and culture have programmed us to need to see to indicate that everything's okay. I mean, they could, you know, there are people who could live like this and be really caring people. It doesn't mean that they're not. And I will explain that to you in a minute. So, but I do want to ask you guys something though, and I think I probably have my answer from the comments that were in the Q&A. But I do want to say honestly, how many of us walking into one of these homes and being greeted with these visuals would make haste to call into the DCS hotline? And yes, I am one of those people, so I get it. But let's go back to me for a moment. So this is me and my mom then and now. So when I was a kid, we moved around a lot. And we were able to stay longer at some places than at others. And sometimes you'd enter our home and not see much. Or you might see some setup in the home that would probably be deemed questionable today. But never, ever did I feel abused, neglected, unloved, or unattended to. I mean, minus the lack of stuff, my mom was really the best 0 to 18 mom a kid could ask for. In fact, if I may share this, my mom found a way to make poverty fun because she used the stuff we were lacking in as teaching moments or creative opportunities. So for example, let's say that one month we couldn't pay for me to go to tap class, right? So instead of making that, trying to hide that from me or making it a negative thing, she'd go, okay, you can't tap this week. So what can we do to allow you to get the self-expression that you get from being in class? Maybe you can do a show for me. What are some ideas that you think that we can do to substitute the inability to go to class this week? So what that would do is open up for me to give suggestions and be a part of the solution, right? and let me know that just because I can't do that doesn't mean that there aren't other things that we can do that can be just as fulfilling, fun, and exciting. So by her doing this, by her allowing me to be a part of the problems and then and feeling to contribute to the solutions, I believe that she really strengthened my resiliencies, because it wasn't a matter of that she was looking for me to solve it, because we do run into that on occasion in the work that we do. But it was really just about, baby, life is full of problems. You're going to have them. And so let's go through them together. And under her umbrella, I'll put it that way, I am able to make those suggestions, try things out, and still be somewhat safe. So I know that with many families that's not possible, but we can't make it impossible for all families just because we say that they're poor and don't have the appearance of things that we would think makes them suitable for being a good parent. Because like I said, there's a lot of times you would have been like, this child isn't getting enough, but I was getting more than enough. So I'm going to go back. I gave myself a little script, so I'm going to go back to my script. So I was saying another thing Mom did that I believe strengthened my resiliency was to not hide our struggles due to poverty from me, but rather to include me in them so that I could learn the skills and mindset needed to overcome the challenges that life will inevitably throw at me. So that's why personally, and this is just me, I'm not talking for a system, but I think that when we try and keep our kids sterile safe, you know, the safe that nothing bad touches them, that once you get them out of that environment where you've kept everything sterile safe, they'll fall hard and fast because they haven't had the gymnasium practice to be able to know how to conduct themselves in this situation, you know, in those adverse situations that we will run into. So my experience shows, at least to me, that you can parent appropriately in poverty, and that we know as the sign, and what we know as the signs, those physical expressions of poverty does not automatically equate to poor parenting and a risk to the children. For if one can do it, meaning if my mom can do it, then it's doable, and it's doable by others, if not by all. So I did promise that I was going to share with you all some questions to ascertain whether an issue is neglect or poverty, meaning from which side, which from the provider side often looks similar. So from the provider side, neglect and poverty often look similar. But before I get there to those questions, let me emphasize that poverty does not cause neglect, or as I'm going to read it how I wrote it. So poverty no cause neglect, and neglect no cause poverty. And what I mean by this is, at least in the way that we culturally see and thus define poverty. Because in essence, poverty is about what you don't have. So neglect is I don't have my parents' love and or attention. So it is, in a sense, poverty. But does neglect have to express itself in the way that we think neglect expresses itself physically to indicate that there's poverty here, or that this person's neglecting their kid, so there's going to be signs of poverty around? Because there are folks who have many things and still practice neglect. So that's why I said it depends. It's in the way that we culturally see and define poverty. One can say that one doesn't cause the other, because unfortunately we tend to see poverty by its physical expression as opposed to the other things that are going on while we're poor. So let's consider this option, that mindset determines neglect. So, and before I go into this, let me explain that the mindset of both, or the bias of both the parents and of the system charged with monitoring their behaviors. Because we each come to the table with something already in our mind, with preconceived notions. So about those questions to ask, don't focus them on the stuff or the resources, the things that you're seeing, those appearances, but rather look to focus them more around perspective, meaning how the parent sees or has interpreted the situation that they're currently in. And I also ask you to check your own perspective or biases as well, meaning be aware of what you bring into the room or that the room might have triggered in you. So to give you, to elaborate on what I'm talking about here, let's go back to the DCS-ish photos. That's my new term for them, the DCS-ish photos. So in the Q&A, I want you to share with all of us here the first thing that popped into your head that you would really have wanted to say to these parents upon viewing this situation. And the reason I asked that is because I'm going to tell you what I did the first time I saw this stuff. So, and I would bet that many of us, you know, on that first reaction, probably had a similar aghast reaction to this. So I'm going to tell you guys a story. Ellis Dumas, who is the regional manager for Region 1 for the Indiana Department of Child Services, conducted a workshop a few years back that I attended where he showed photos like these. My first reaction to these visuals, or to those visuals that he showed, really? No, like really. Now, okay, let me confess. Now, part of the reason for that reaction of pure disgust of mine was that I abhor mess. And personally, I could not live like that. And I'm shocked to find that people can. So, but I say that even though my bathtub has looked like that, and during a funk, my bedroom did look like the one on the far left of the screen. So, but let me say though, as soon as the funk was over, order, because I like order. But I do have a cousin though, who is just a happy kitty in that kind of chaos. And she's not poor, she's not neglectful, she's, in fact, she's very considerate of others, but you know, that's her space. And I'm digressing. So yeah, I'm a considerer of, yes.
We have some responses.
Yes, please feel free to interrupt me because I can always go back to my script.
So some of the responses include clean up and I'll be back. Mm-hmm. What's going on here? What do you need? What kind of help is available to you? It looks like laziness to me. Maybe the parent needs some parenting education or mental health. I have done home visiting for most of my career, and to be honest, I wouldn't have said anything. I don't judge. I try to model behavior. I would have had a conversation with parents about safety, but not in a judgmental way. Tell me how your last week has been. How have you been feeling? And then the final one is, I would talk to them and ask them if they had a dresser or chest in which to put the clothes. Also, as long they clean the bathtub, they may not be responsible for it to look otherwise. And then a final last one just came in is, I have family members who is the same. I believe it is their sense of control due to childhood trauma, but the most loving, kind wife and mother.
Interesting. So I'm going to ask the last person who says that she's had cousins like that, but she feels that it's due to things that they learned growing up. I find that interesting because I also have a colleague whose office looks like that, and I wouldn't necessarily place it on any type of trauma the person went through. Just sometimes there may be other things, like it makes me feel like that there's stuff going on in the room, or there are people in the room, and so yeah, or it's just easier to have it all out because I'm gonna have to pull it anyway. So I just think we have to be careful about making generalizations and really take the time to ask the questions to get to know how that person processes, because we don't all process the same, and I think sometimes we get stuck there. So, but anyway, I am very happy, I'll say that term, that you guys were very positive about it, because in all honesty, the first time I see something that's a little shocking, That real voice will say something like, really, how the heck can you be doing this? Like, what's wrong with you? Da, 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 da. That goes on in your head. But then your outside voice will say something much more encouraging and comforting. So I just kind of wanted to give us that moment to really kind of be like, to share our moments of disgust or shock, because it happens, you know, and I think that we shouldn't pretend like it doesn't and try and poo-poo it, but understand that it serves a purpose, and it opens us up to self-reflect and to understand why we're there. As I gave in my example, I don't like mess. And so unfortunately, when I run into it, that will be my first reaction, but I also know better, and I stop myself and don't express that, but I know it's there, and express myself in a much more supportive way. But
one final thought that popped up was, my first thought was, sometimes my room looks like that. I also thought about how my mom always said, make sure your kitchen and bathroom is always clean. Definitely ask questions.
I mean, I'm serious, my bathroom has looked like that on several occasions. So, you know, I wouldn't necessarily think somebody would need to remove me from my home, but, you know, I only say that to say that if we all kind of self-reflect or think about people we know, we realize that we can't make that a general indicator of things. So, but anyway, I want to go back to talking about my experience with Ellis, because the happy kitty's kind of driving me crazy now. I want to change the slide. So, but back to Ellis. Ellis then explained the full story behind the photos, which, by the way, the photos failed miserably, in my opinion, to convey. And lo and behold, I had an epiphany. We have been taught to place priority on appearances and on our feelings and tendencies. So, thanks to Ellis, thank you, Ellis, if you're out there. As soon as something makes me feel uncomfortable, I immediately start asking questions that step me away from my discomfort in my effort to get me to the truth. Meaning that I work hard to not ask questions meant to confirm my discomfort or my suspicions or my skepticism, but to rather ask questions that attempt to disprove it. In other words, I give the other person the benefit of the doubt rather than the skepticism of my doubt. So I want to give an example that happened to me recently. So, you know, we're all going through the midst of this post-George Floyd era, and we had that really bad windstorm here that pretty much blew our backyard fence. I don't know where it blew it, but we couldn't find it. So anyway, I'm in a townhome development, and so we share the neighbors share the fences. So we were missing about 7 panels to our fence, and so I called the developer who told me to call the fence company, and I called the fence company. They came out to give a quote, and she quoted me like $600 for 7 panels. And I was going, what? So then my neighbor, who is not Black, she called them, she started talking to a gentleman from there, and he quoted her a different amount. So here we are in the George Floyd era, and I'm looking at the appearances, and I'm like, So immediately I had that reaction that this was this girl comes out, she sees what I look like, and she starts, telling me that it's going to be all this. But then the girl that lives next door to me calls them or starts talking with them, and they give her a much cheaper rate, which was $7 a panel. Okay. So I was like, wow. As I felt myself going in the direction of that it's racism, I stopped myself and I said, you know what? I said, let me find another reason for this situation. So in other words, let me, by elimination, get to that the only thing that this could be was racism, as opposed to immediately assuming that's what it was. So as I was talking to my neighbor, she was telling me that she worked for Superior Construction. So she's in the business. So then she started telling me what she had said to them to get the right term. So there's terminology in that industry. And the way that I probably described it was indicative of another term. In fact, I learned that eventually. So when I called it panels, she was thinking I meant the whole thing of 10 panels. So the whole, what I call the little panels are the big panels to them. So she quoted replacing the 3 big panels. So replacing all of those was the $600. But what I needed was the little slits. And I can't remember what the word that my neighbor told me, but that's the word that she said to get what she wanted. So then I was like, oh, so it was the fact of that I didn't know the terminology. So that's why I said I make it a point to go to ask the questions and look at it through a lens to disprove that reactionary response to it, as opposed to going right there and dealing with it. So at the end of the day, it wasn't that the sales girl was racist. It was that I just communicated the wrong term and got the answer for that term. So back to our DCS-ish photos, instead of saying to the parent what my disgust with the mess would want me to say, the method of operating I just described about me and the fence moves me to rather ask, so I am looking at your decor design and I'm just curious, how'd you come up with it? So, you know, and say it like, you know, I'm just curious, like, how did you come up with this? This is really interesting. So, which for me is a true statement, because I am in my head going, where did you come? Like, why are you doing this? Like, what is this about? But instead kind of go, you know, I was just looking at this and I'm just curious, how'd you come up with it? Now, this slide, it says I'll either get an explanation or an excuse. And the excuse is my first red flag. The explanation is also a red flag, but of a different sort, in that it implies that first set of definitions given for poor, meaning it informs me that deficiencies do exist, but they're either in resources, skills, knowledge, or supports. In other words, they're gaps that I'm more than likely can help the person fill. But back to excuses. So let's say the excuse given here is, oh, my house ain't normally like this. I just been distracted. Now for me, that's another red flag, because how long have you been distracted? And when I ask that question, or when that question gets asked, I please ask that you do it with a tone of concern for the person and not with a suspicious tone. Really, like, you know, how long have you been distracted? So after asking her with the tone of concern, she replies, around a month. Now, what that answer communicates is that something is going on in the parent's life that has her rather than her having it. And if it has distracted her from orderly living or a clean home, it has probably also distracted her from her kids. And she may not even realize this or see it as neglect. So my advice is that a direct question about her kids is not yet available to you. So asking her immediately, why are you doing this with your kids? Da, 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 da. I don't think this is the right time, only because you're immediately going to put that person on the defensive. They're going to distrust your motives and their, you know, in talking with them even more. And we know what happens to us when we get defensive, when that defense elevates. You know, it could get a little extreme, it could get violent even. So rather than risking that path, I would suggest trying something like, now I'm going to say this, I know the DCS has policies, rules, and laws, so I'm not saying that this is what you say for a DCS person, but just giving you different ways to look at a situation that might present different options for you to consider. So let's do this. Let's get you past this distraction, okay? We can either remove the kids to permit you the time, space, and access to supports that you need to work on what's distracting you. Or the kids can remain in the home, but we'll need to get you some monitored assistance with DCS's Family Preservation Services. So remember, I said this is simplified, and my hope is that it just kind of opens up the mind a little bit to think of some different ways to approach these situations or to address these situations. So I'm going to open up the floor for questions again. So about what I just shared about, especially my fence company story, and how to give ourselves that opportunity to step back and see if we can find another reason for the situation than the one that we come into the room giving it based upon what we see. Or even how we put together the puzzle pieces of what it is that we know. So again, put them in the Q&A so that I may get to them before our session here today ends. And Rachel, please let me know if and when we have questions in the Q&A, as you have been doing. I'm just reminding you to keep doing it. Thank you. So
there's a statement in there.
Okay.
It says, I worry that responding with, tell me about your decor, will be received as sarcasm or passive aggressive and judgmental.
If I may, that's your worry. It may not be taken that way. It depends on how you bring it. Now, if you bring it from the point of, I'll put it this way, I'll make it about me. If I bring it from the point of my disgust, yeah, that tone will come out. But if I find a way to really be curious, I mean, if I put the emphasis more on my curiosity of why she chose to do this, as opposed to the accusation of how could you do this, that I may get the right tone from it, and then be able to let her know that I have an actual interest and not that I'm trying to get something out of her, that distrust, defensive thing. I think it's really, I don't think it's difficult for us to let people know that I'm not doing something to accuse you, but that I'm really interested in you as a person, kind of a thing, and why you made this choice and why you thought this was the best thing. I think sometimes we don't allow folks to, we don't permit them to share their story in the thing. So, but anyway, let me get back to, oh, here we go. So the example that I love scripts, but then like when I get off, I have to go, where was I at? So anyway, the example that I just provided falls under the second set of definitions given for poor. I did want to point that out because the questioning helped reveal that the parent was more on the emotional side of poverty, meaning that she has internalized her poverty with her emotions now wrapped around it. Now, what I mean is that being distracted for a month is indicative of an internal battle going on, and an internal battle is indicative of doubt, and most likely self-doubt of one's capacity. So it can communicate that there exists feelings of insecurity, unsuitability, faultiness. Thus the quote here, self-doubting when poverty has infiltrated the emotions. So if my situation has started to make me feel, so if my physical situation has started to make me feel bad about me and to doubt my capacity and to doubt my ability, thus I can be distracted for a month because I can't make a decision about something, then it lets me know that you've moved from it being something that can be worked on. You just are lacking skills, knowledge, know-how, that it's now become a part of you and you've internalized it. And if this state is permitted to linger, it will more likely than not end up being destructive to both self and to others, and yes, to their kids. So Rachel, I see we have some Q&A. You want to give them to me?
Yes, so a couple of them are comments. It says, your example helped me reflect and look at my own instant reaction to situations and then reframe them to try to find the truth.
Wow.
She didn't choose to do anything. Maybe she really didn't see it. And then the follow-up comment, decor is a vocabulary issue. Keep the language simple. Clients with resources will know the situation and will be concerned.
See, as soon as I wrote the word decor, I knew somebody was going to call me out on that. I couldn't think of the word. So like I was thinking interior design, just sometimes the vocabulary is on point and sometimes I can't find the word to save my life. So I used decor because I knew you guys would get it. I didn't use decor as I didn't mean it as the actual word that I would use. I just couldn't come up with one. Like I like your setup, I guess. I don't know. But anyway, thank you for that. You have a very valid point.
two additional comments is
Mhm.
she could be having mental health issues,
Mhm.
or she is busy with just trying to get through each day and get her children through each day.
Exactly. That's why I was saying it's still something that she can be helped with. So it could be a time issue, a help issue. It could be a know-how issue. I don't know how to make these things all work together. So that those all fall under that first definition of poor. It's the second definition of poor that it gets a little, I'll say tricky, because there's a lot more involved and it will require a lot more investment on our part, which I do cover that later on. So those first set of definitions given for poor, I personally term those a knowledge poverty issue, meaning even if neglect could be indicated, it eventually will get revealed that what is really underlying and driving the observed behaviors is what this parent doesn't know. So knowledge poverty. I saw time poverty and I was thinking about time poverty and I realized that I think knowledge poverty is really the issue. And I will hopefully be able to clearly communicate why. So knowledge poverty is ignorance. And so first of all, let me say that ignorance does not mean you're stupid. It means that you don't know. If you look up the etymology of that word, unfortunately, contextually, it has a whole different meaning, but ignorance just means I do not know. So all of us are ignorant in something because there are all things that we don't know, okay? And knowledge poverty also means I don't know what I need to know. So it's not only that I don't know, but often it's the stuff that I need to know that I don't know. And then we have to remember that I can only behave according to my knowledge base. So you can't ask me to have a behavior that is not within the context of my knowledge base. I need to be educated or informed about it. And I also need to be informed how to incorporate that into my existence so that you can then come to me later and say, you knew to do this, but you didn't do it, which is a whole different dynamic. And actually, I think more of what the word stupid implies is that you knew better, but you chose to do differently. So why is this awareness of knowledge poverty so critical? Because a lack of knowledge is really the root of all poverty. And the more knowledge we have, the more capacity, the more power we have. So I know people are going, what? Yep, I see the chat thing coming down. But let me give my story and then we'll go to your comments, okay? So I'm gonna elaborate with something that happened, I'd say maybe about, actually the end of last year. So I was at church talking with this teen and I asked him, so why do you think God is omnipotent? So he gave me some reasons. I mean, and they were good ones, but it wasn't the one that I was intending to bring to his attention. So finally, I said to him that God is omnipotent because he is omniscient. Because when you know everything, you can't fail, you can't be uncertain, you can't mess up, you can't feel overwhelmed, you can't feel overstressed because you have a correct answer, you have a solution for every situation, everything. And even if you could have a need under omniscience, omniscience would enable you to resolve it in the blink of an eye, if not sooner. Most of our poverty is that we don't know things. I don't know how to get the rent paid. I don't know how to stop my children from doing X. We don't know. But if we knew, if we had omniscience, we would not have poverty. So, and I shared this specifically with him because I wanted him to understand why education is so important. Because another thing that we're seeing socially is that kids are downplaying the importance of education. And it's so important because it is really the source. That saying knowledge is power, it really is. And I used to think, oh, that's a cute one. Yeah, knowledge is power, but now I get it, because what knowledge does is it gives you it equips you to be able to address the things that life will throw at you. And so I wanted to bring that same understanding to you guys about knowledge and power and education, and how we need to put more emphasis on making part of our role be to educate those who come into our sphere of influence, you know, and realize that if education is a part of the problem, and it's not just what, we also have to show them the how-to. The how-to is a big problem too. We don't think of that as a knowledge component. But if you give me this great smartphone and you don't show me how to do it, you've just wasted my time. So yeah, I know about smartphones and that they exist, but I have no idea of how to make this thing do what I need it to do to be useful and of benefit to me. So I just want to talk about work for a second, and then I'm going to go back to me. And then, but before I talk about work, are there comments, Rachel, that I should go over?
Yeah, there are a couple comments and one question currently. The first comment is, I think the tone used for the choices you give the parent is important as well.
Definitely.
That where there's accountability comes in is when they have been made aware. The final comment before the question is, knowledge poverty is so true. When people are armed with knowing, they make different decisions. After all, decisions are made from the holder's knowledge base. And then the question posed is, do you think your own past experience has made you more sensitive to not be judgmental and more of an investigation approach?
I think a lot of where I'm at has a lot to just do with who I am. I think we all do come with a personality. And so that's why we end up processing things differently. And so I've always been a questioner, and my mom, I will call it intuitive or just amazingly smart, because I think she's amazingly smart, was smart enough to see that. And instead of dousing it, she really encouraged it. So I would ask a lot of questions, and she would take me to the library. We didn't have computers back then, but so we went to the library a lot to answer my questions, and she would not be afraid to let me know she didn't know. So here's her baby, helping her to know more, so helping her to have more capacity and more power. So I think that it's just a natural extension of me. And I think what poverty did was give me the platform to really be able to run with that tendency of mine. So anyway, the families that Indiana Parenting Institute primarily serves are poor because of what they don't know about, and or because they don't know how to leverage the knowledge they do have for their benefit or comfort. Those battling through internalized poverty, that second set of definitions I gave for poor, need more services and attention than we are equipped to provide. So with these, we end up helping them to create a village with our community partners, able to help them through and past this internalization and the mental health challenges that it has led to. Meaning like those feelings of failure or inadequacy, which reminds me, you remember I had said that there were levels to poverty? Well, the further down the rabbit hole you go, the more serious the situation gets. That internalization of the negative aspect of one's poverty that I just shared. And if we're pulling someone up out of that rabbit hole that has reached that level or depth to be at support dependency, that is that they benefit primarily, if not solely, from others' generosity, and probably again due to those feelings of failure or incapacity, it will require a greater investment in them on our part, of our time, of our resources, yes, even of our emotions, due to the amount of misinformation that we have to peel away at to get them connected to the knowledge that will get them on the path to thriving. So it's not going to be quick. It's not going to be easy. It will at times get very, very frustrating. It will at times require so much time, you'll start considering that maybe this person can't change. But unfortunately, some of us learn way slower than others. I have my areas of learning way slow, but the investment does pay off. And so that's my encouragement to us, is that keep going, keep feeding them with that knowledge, with that know-how, and eventually you'll start to see some fruit from those seeds that you plant. My mom likes to talk a lot about planting seeds, and that means thoughts, ideas, skills. And I just think that as long as we make that a part of the assistance that we give our families, that in the end it will bear fruit, and we may not get to see it, but it will bear fruit, So a friend of mine says it this way: if God gave up on us as quickly as we give up on people, we would be in some serious doo-doo, which is how he says it. But anyway, so to recap, poverty, like most things in life, is a bit complex, meaning I cannot rely solely on my programming about what poverty looks like for an accurate determination of neglect and or risk of harm. And in our over 14 years of experience in this field, it has shown us that it bodes better to assess where this family's knowledge poverty currently has planted them. Meaning, is the family still functional in its chaos? Or has the family stopped functioning with chaos being the outcome? So the reason I put it the chaos in quotes is, as I was saying earlier, I have people who live like that and they're fine with it, and it doesn't mean that they are incapable of fulfilling their responsibilities. It's just, there's a comfort for them in that. And why is something wrong with their comfort? Because I was told that that's not something that somebody should be comfortable in. I can't assess that you have deficiencies just because you aren't doing things the way that I would do them, and so I think that we run those biases that we come to the table with on both sides of the equation. Really need to, we need to be aware of those going into a situation and ask ourselves, is it my bias talking? Is it my programming talking? Or is it actually the situation going on here? And that's why I say asking those questions to help you disprove that immediate reaction that might be formulated in biases is a good way to get around that. And it's hard to do because you want to go with that first reaction, but with practice, you can take on any new behavior. So I practice that one a lot, and I find myself having to, no, I'm going to go this way, because I'm telling you, I wanted to call the newspaper and talk about this fence company. But anyway, so finally, the promise questions. And I'm not going to read the slide. I'm just going to give a recap, okay? So when you guys get the PowerPoint, you now know that there's a PowerPoint. You can read through all of them, or you can read through all of them while I'm talking. So my suggestion is that you go after questions that move you away from your first reaction and towards an understanding of where this parent stands on what I'll call the hopelessness scale, because they're feeling insecure. They're in that second definition of poor. That is, are they able to communicate to you a handling of the situation? So it's the poor definition number one. Or are they communicating some stress, some heavy stress, even to trauma around the situation? So I want to throw this at you. And if you want to disagree with me on this, please do. I wanted to share this just to see what kind of comment I would get. But once you get them to confront and confess to their stress or trauma that is overwhelming them, your offer of home removal while we help you get through this seems less like a punishment and more like the help that they have probably been praying for. So I say that, I wanted to bring that to the table because I find when someone allows me to be vulnerable and weak and to feel safe to express that, their input often feels more like relief than criticism. So that's why I threw that out there to see what you guys thought about that, because I find that I'm a little bit more open to a person if I can really put all of my vulnerability on the table and know that I'm safe, that they're not going to use it against me or criticize me about it. So, oh, and then I wanted to talk about the why questions. I don't think that we ask why enough. I mean, you go into a situation like the photos, the DCS-ish photos that I showed earlier. I don't think we go, so why did you, why this? Like, why did you decide to do this? Or what made you think that that was the best way to handle the situation? Or why, my favorite question is, why did you think this was the best way to do it? Because I think we do things because we think it's the right or the best thing decision. So I'm just curious why. I mean, I just want to know, I want to see it the way you do. The why question is your opportunity to say to them, I want to see this like you do. We're so used to why being accusatory, but why is really about, please put me in your shoes. Why did you think to do this? Why did you choose to say that? So we got to look at the why that way and not think of the why as, why did you do that? Like, what's wrong with you? That's not really the why question. The why is, I just want to understand why you did that. I want to see it through your eyes. So Anyway, see, I knew I was going to lose my place at some point. So, oh yes. Back to me. That's probably why I lost it, because I have to go back to me, right? So yes, I am a product of poverty. The poverty defined in the first set of definitions given for poor, poverty as a physical situation. And thanks to, not in spite of in my case, but thanks to poverty, I've been able to have these amazing life experiences listed here, and this is my short list. In fact, as I was practicing this presentation for the umpteenth million time, I was real nervous, y'all, sorry. I realized that I didn't include my current state appointments in this list, so I'll share those with you as well. So currently I serve as the chair of the state's Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Indiana Holiday Commission. I'm a cabinet member on the Governor's Workforce Cabinet, which is the state of Indiana's workforce board, and I'm also a commissioner on the Governor's Teacher Compensation Commission. So, hey, Rachel, I saw the chat. Do you have some questions?
You have a couple comments followed by a couple questions.
Okay, I'm here.
So a couple of the comments seem to go together. It says, I'd like to inquire if the individual has some other reason for things being out in the middle of the room. Some people have a perception that if it is put away, it is gone and I will not be able to find it.
Exactly.
Asking the question, did the person grow up in the type of environment that this is normal to their own life experience? Asking the question, posing the question, is being untidy wrong? Is it my own personal bias? And am I considering their cultural experiences? And then I agree with the approach of giving them choices, but in most cases, when I have worked with families, the idea of removing the children for any reason is absolutely horrifying. Also, from my experience, it's never just as simple as remove while they get things together. Once a child is removed, it is so much more complicated to reunify. And then you have questions posed as well.
Okay.
The first question is, could you give some examples of poverty-related knowledge gaps from your parenting workshops at IPI?
For example, currently we do a project, we have a program called the Joy Project, and basically what that does is it works with formerly homeless families that are in permanent supportive housing, and so we go in just to help them make that transition a little bit more successfully. And one of the girls was trying to get her Section 8 converted, if I remember correctly, because she came over from Illinois. And so she was having some issues with that. And so because of the knowledge poverty, she was really more trying to avoid her property manager than to know that there was someone out there that she could ask those questions to, who could connect her to that information so that she could help herself, which is the role that we served in. The same thing with unemployment. When COVID happened, I had a lot of the parents that we work with there call about unemployment, that they were having huge issues getting through and all that stuff. And so because I'm on the workforce board and I deal with the commissioner of the Department of Workforce Development, I was able to ask him questions directly and get them that information about what they needed to do so that they could get that situation taken care of. So in the beginning, I had talked about connections. I think the greatest, and I think I go into this near the end of the presentation here, is that one of the greatest tools that we can have are the people in our lives. And in fact, if you don't have the people, or you don't have the right people, you're not going to connect to the things that you need to connect to. So I think a lot of times when we try and keep our circles tight, we handicap ourselves to be able to have the experiences and thus the knowledge from those experiences to really make us influential, powerful people, you know? And so I think that what we're able to do be the part of their network that they can reach out to get more information than they currently have. So that's the knowledge poverty. If you don't know, and I had knowledge poverty in my own life. I mean, I went through a period where my house went into foreclosure and I did not know what to do, how to handle that situation. And this was before working with mom. So I didn't know what to do. And so I basically hid because I'm like, I can't give you nothing. So people stop calling me. I don't know what to do. And eventually, and I would hide that I was having this issue, right? So eventually one day I got the guts. And I am spiritual, religious, whatever term you want to use. So I believe it was God kicking me in the butt. But I finally shared with somebody what I was going through. And this person just happened to be able to tell me what I needed to do. And I went and did it, which is that housing opportunities thing, and got my situation taken care of. So we all have a knowledge poverty component. What's sad is that we tend to hide it, as opposed to realizing that that group of people that you have in your life are there to help you connect to those things that you don't know about and to expand your knowledge and reduce or lessen your knowledge poverty. So anyway, let's see. My point, let me get back to my point. So my point here with my presentation is not to glorify poverty, but with the right perspective, it serves as a wonderful tool, and that is my message here. That's why I can say, thanks to my experience, poverty, in whatever form it chooses to express itself, does not automatically imply neglect. And that neglect is more from a mental state, a perspective, than from a physical state. So I am here with you today to show, look what poverty did. In fact, look what society calls poverty is still doing, meaning that if you all knew my present stuff situation, let's just say that society would still consider me and call me po. And so I'm here to encourage you as we work with our families, look at what poverty can do. Look at what it can do. Because over here, I'm feeling very rich and very blessed and very connected. And what I mean by connected is those positions, those positions I now hold, the experiences that you saw on that previous list, I never had the money to do those things, but I did have the connections to make them happen. And I think we forget that. So poverty is not necessarily about what you personally have. It's about who you have more so, or in conjunction with. So, and I think that it's who you have, what you know, because of that knowledge thing. And then I think what you have is the outcome of those two. But anyway, I also want to leave you with this mantra. I don't necessarily really say this to myself when I get up in the morning, it's kind of the yoga thing, but I do believe that it pretty much exemplifies my life, which is let poverty propel you forward, not hold you back. So if that resonates, please share it with others. For again, I'm here to tell you it works. So that is the end of my presentation. I will open up the floor for more questions, and I can elaborate on some things if you want me to. And I do have a sheet with some data stuff on it that I can share if you guys want me to do that too, but I would love to answer questions. Or hear, point counterpoints, please. You don't have to agree with anything I said. Because in your disagreement, I will learn so much more. And I did promise my contact information for you data freaks out there. So there it is. And thank you.
I have some questions for you. The first one is, are you saying that we need to understand poverty better and all of its complexities if we want to be able to figure out whether or not there is neglect in a household? And then any more examples of this from your work?
So let me answer that. I don't think it's possible to know everything about poverty. And like I said, it's a very, it's a bit complex. But I think that the more aware we are of its complexity, it'll stop us from jumping on that first reaction or the immediate programming, because the immediate programming gives you a standard. But as you get to know a situation, you learn more about it, and it may it may not follow along with that standard or go a little bit against that standard. But the standard isn't there to cover everything; it's to cover the generalities of things. And so I think that it behooves us in any area of our lives to strive to have more information about it than to just stick with what I feel or that bit of information that I know. Because as we also know, information changes. I mean, how often do we hear about stuff that science will tell us is good for us, and then 5 years later it's you don't want to do that. So it's important to keep learning and to keep knowing what's going on so that you can get as close, especially when you're dealing with lives and with kids especially, to get as close to the truth as you possibly can. So next one.
And the next question, was there a change moment in your life where you felt that you got out of poverty, or do you not look at that moment as a defining moment in your life?
Can I tell you when it all became really cool for me is one day I woke up and I liked me. When we're going through high school, we're trying to be like everybody else. You want to be in the popular groups. You want to be, one of the pretty girls, one of the cool girls or whatever, right? If you're a girl. I was spending, and plus being Black too, you can't, and I went to a private school for high school. My mom got a scholarship because someone she knew said, you should send your daughter here. So, I went to school with predominantly white kids. I think the number of Black kids at our school was maybe about 2%. And so I think I had 4 in my class. So in those high school years where you're trying to develop your own identity, I went through those periods where I would have preferred to be white just because they seemed to have it cooler, right? They had a lot more stuff than I did. And so I spent a lot of those teen years and those early 20 years trying to be something else. And then one day I woke up and I realized that I really liked me. And when I realized that I really liked me, all the rest of it was cool, because the poverty's part of me, right? So if I really like me, the reason I really like me is because the poverty helped to make me the me that I am, that I'm sitting here going, I'm not so bad. And I think it's really interesting that I think there are a lot of us out there that have difficulty doing that. Difficulty saying, you know what, I'm not perfect. I got my issues. I can be a little OCD. I said, but I really like who I am. And I think that at that point is when I was like, I loved all of it. I loved the poverty. I loved, that we had all of our furniture out on the street once, because it all made us, it all made me. And I also believe it also made my mom who we are today. So next question.
So the next are statements for you.
Mm-hmm.
The first one is, thank you for your presentation and explaining your approach to parenting, understanding, and intervening with families. Connections are very important for changing life circumstances. I enjoyed your presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you for your great insight. Labels and the power of the tongue is huge. And then thank you for your presentation. Being a nurse, the environment picture shown depicts neglect. However, you open my eyes to deeper issues.
Yeah, I just think the conversation that I wanted to have is just really about being more self-aware is really what this is about, in terms of that. I wanted to give my story just to show you that if somehow somebody had came into our home at the wrong time and decided to call Child Protective Services, it could be a whole different outcome, but even with those things going on, look at the outcome that happened. So what would my life have been like if we had gotten a call and they came in and took me out of the house? I don't think I would be in this situation. I might be, I just don't know who would have gotten placed into my life. if I would have had a drastically different situation or not. But I want us to just be more aware that just because something looks a certain way doesn't mean that it is a certain way or doesn't have the capacity to be something much better. So.
And then a follow-up question is, what skills or helps allowed your mother to be able to successfully parent you and not end up in the quote unquote system?
Wow. I've never asked her that question. That probably is a good question to ask her. Let me give you what I think. I think that my mom looked at parenting as an adventure because that was the kind of life she gave me. I mean, everything was an adventure, you know? And so I think that the only way that she was able to have me feel that way about it was that that's how she felt about it as well. So I think that having that sense of adventure allowed her to do things and make choices and see things through a lens that, I mean, she could have went the other way. She could have went to definition of poverty number 2 and just started feeling worthless and incapable and faulty and all those things. But instead, she didn't do that. I mean, and I cannot tell you how much fun I had with my mom and just being able to, my mom calls it telling stories. She tells some great stories. And so I just got blessed in that way, you know. But like I said, if somebody came into our environment, they would have had a whole different assessment of it because, like I said, we're taught. I call what we're taught being programmed because that's really what it is. But we're programmed to see things a certain way. So when you see this, it means this. When you hear this, it means this. And I think that what my time on this earth has taught me is that it's much more complicated than that, or it's much more complex. Humans are not that simple and we're not that easy. You know, even helping people, I cannot tell you how frustrating it gets to want to see these families do better, you know, but it's really their decision at the end of the day. And all that we can do and continue to do is just be there for them to give them that information or those connections that they need to get to the next level when they're ready to do it. And know and be prepared that it's a long-term investment. So, okay, my next question.
And then the comment listed it says, I love the perspective of what are the barriers and how can we remove them, and or what are you lacking and how can we get you that, rather than assuming a person has everything they need and chooses not to utilize it.
Right.
Whether it's skill, health, perspective, material resources, etc. I know that when my own space is not the way I like it or need it to be, it's because I'm lacking time, help, or energy. Thank you for your presentation.
Oh my gosh, thank you. Well, you know, she said something and I want to read it, but so I'm going to read this from this article that I got from The Guardian. The title of the article is How Being Poor Can Lead to a Negative Spiral of Fear and Self-Loathing. It's an article by Dawn Foster that came out, I believe, in 2016, but I just liked this paragraph, and I want to read it to you because it addresses what the person who wrote that comment just said. Commenting on the actions and choices of those in poverty seems to have become a national sport. It's rare to ever have a discussion about economic hardship, and this she's talking about in Britain. So in Britain, without a bystander or internet commenter leaning forward and opining, but they've all got flat screen TVs and smoke cigarettes. The economic choices of the very poorest are seen as ripe for public dissection. So it made me realize, why are we so quick to criticize? You know, why is our response to anything that makes us uncomfortable or that we don't understand to criticize it? So in essence, when I go in that house and I see that mess, my first thing to do is to want to criticize it, as opposed to going, okay, why is this? Maybe she likes it, you know, and is there something wrong with her liking it, you know, as opposed to going, look at this, you know, I can't even believe you're doing this. Why are you making you know, we go there, and it made me realize that, again, that's something that to intentionally or consciously make sure I'm more aware of. Because I have to admit, sometimes I do like criticizing folks, but you know, it's not going to help them, you know, and I need to be much more aware of that. And so reading that in that article made me aware that it's a tendency. I used to think it was just an American tendency, but I'm beginning to see it's a human tendency. And so we just need to be careful about it. And I don't know why we do it, but we do. Next question.
Thank you for presenting that. We would like to thank all of our funders, Geminus Community Partners, and the Service League of Northwest Indiana, and all other community partners. You can find a list of them in our credits that will play shortly. And we want to thank you for joining us.